I think what I'm going to do for this is I'm going to show you 3 different bass sounds, and there's some techniques in there that I use that maybe you'll find useful. The first bass sound I'm going to show you was from this track, War. That kind of growl sound there. Yeah, it comes in throughout the track. I want to show you this because of something completely ridiculous. This track I did with Astronaut, and they brought this sound to the table. So this is what it's sounding like. So this sound comes from FM8, and it's actually not a particularly complicated patch. You've just got the main, a sine wave being modulated by another sine wave, slight detuning, and then that being modulated by a square wave, slight detuning, and then that being modulated by a soft square, slight detuning. But there's nothing to shout home about there. You can just see it's one modulating another, and just these extra little, these are just creating overtones, and then it's running through the FM8 filter as well, which is here, and the filter is assigned to the mod wheel, I believe. Oh. Yeah, the filter cutoff is on the mod wheel. Nothing special, but what they did to this sound, and what I couldn't believe at the time, was that if you look at the bottom here, there is 1, 2, 3, 4 multi-band compressors on there. I was like, what the fuck? And not only that, but I guess you all know about the OTT preset. Three of these multi-band compressors are on the OTT preset, in one after the other, and I couldn't believe what I was seeing. But before the compressors, there's this EQ here, and it's just a big boost, and it's that's being automated. So when you hear these growls, you can see this curve here is just automating this curve is automating the EQ boost. And as you automate the EQ boost before those compressors, it's just really squashing the sound, so that when the boost, gets to this frequency and then crosses over into the other compressor bands, the other bands are just lifting up, and it's just really sort of balancing all of the frequencies of the sound, through these compressors, so that the sound is just big and full in each frequency band in your face as the EQ moves about. There's 3 of these are on the OTT setting, and then there's a final multi-band compressor, which is mainly just squashing the high end of the compressor and then bringing a level up to make it nice and crisp sounding. Because without that final one, it just sounds like the high end isn't present enough. If you try this technique out, be warned that you need to put a gate on the end, because otherwise you get a little fart at the end of the note. I don't know if you can hear. You can hear a little fart there where the compressors are releasing. So what I've done here is I've got this. This is just a gating plugin. You could probably use the Ableton Gate or anyone, but I like this one because it responds to MIDI notes. So I've set it to respond to MIDI, so that when the MIDI note releases, the gate completely cuts off, and then you get rid of that little fart at the end. So I was shocked at this technique. Yeah. Yeah, pretty much. It's only doing the high end. Yeah, you can see the settings there. It's actually the ratio is set to infinite, so it's actually totally limiting the high end. Crazy technique, but I'm not going to lie, I was curious, and then after this track I made some bass sounds, and I tried putting, like, I didn't go to 3, I tried putting 2 multi-band compressors on, and you know, I got some results out of it. Not always good, but I have tried it. I've set up a preset with this where I can throw it on a bass sound and try it if I want. So I'm going to show you another bass sound. This bass sound is something that I have had a lot of fun with recently. I'll show you it in this track. This one here. Same bass sound here. Same bass sound here. And same bass sound here. And later on, and even later. So I've been having a lot of fun with this bass sound, which comes from Serum, and what I did was I took some little percussion sounds. I'm switching to Cubase here because this is where I sort of did the designing for this patch. I took these 3 percussion sounds. They're just on this track here. There's one. Those 3 little percussion sounds, and then I imported them into Serum. Let's see. Like, have you done much making your own wavetables in Serum? Have you been doing this? Because this is like, it's exciting, I think. Let's add in a Serum, and I'll show you how to make some wavetables out of little percussion sounds. So there's Serum. What we want to do, when you've got little percussion, you can try this yourself with any little percussion sound or any tiny small sound, because what we're going to do is import these as single waveform cycles. So I've got them in Finder here. Usefully, I'm going to have to drag them in like this. So when you've got a little, oh yeah, for some reason I can't. For some reason, Cubase has changed, because normally you can just drag direct from your sequencer onto Serum, but Cubase used to be able to do that, but doesn't anymore. So I've got to drag it from Finder. However, so you take your little sound and you drop it into this box down here, and there we go. Serum loads just by normal with a default saw wave. So what you want to do is you want to take that one out, because we're not interested in that. So we go to remove the current index, and then now if I play that sound, it will play, and that will be the waveform. Oh, put those down there. I'm just gonna unlayer that. So I had a few other sounds that I picked out as well. So I'm just going to drop these into the boxes next to them, like this. So they're kind of, these are just similar percussion sounds. I just found them in the sort of electro percussion sounds. I found them in my sample library. They sounded kind of similar. So I dropped them into Serum because I thought it would be cool to see what happens when you morph between them, because at the moment, when you change the wavetable position, it just only switches between those 3 tables. and what I want to do is morph between them, try and get some cool sounds. So you select them all like this, go to this morph menu up here, and then you've got 4 different options there, and you basically try them all and see which sounds best. Crossfade is just an audio crossfade, so it just audio crossfades from one to the other. Spectral, it analyzes the frequencies and then does a fade of each partial frequency that makes up the waveform. But you don't need to know necessarily that. What you need to know is this: you need to pick one and see which one sounds best to you. If you don't like what it sounds and want to try something else, you just click undo here. Try spectral. I think I preferred the crossfade one for this. So there you've got like a really cool little change in tone. My favorite thing to do with this waveform is to slap a phaser on it. And then you can start to hear where I got all those bass sounds from. So if we look at the track that was called Squirm, if I show you that bass sound here, come on Ableton, I can load up Serum. Oh, and there it is. That's the exact waveform pretty much that I've just made, and it's running through a phaser, and it's and that's pretty much that sound. I've obviously run it through the compressor. This is a favorite one in Serum. You probably all do this because it makes everything sound awesome and amazing, and probably a bit overkill, but anyway. And you know, just using this hyper module just for a little bit of stereo width, but essentially that sound is just coming from the waveform that I showed you how to make, running through a phaser. Ooh. The track Nail Gun here, I think that one was made from the same thing. Here is the main patch for it. Let's go in and have a look at that. Again, this was the waveform here. I'm using, when each note plays, I'm using the velocity here just to modulate the pulse width on it, so you can see that changing as it plays. Again, it's running through a phaser, and in the effects section, the only other processing, a bit of drive, a bit of stereo width, a bit of a low pass filter just to give it, the envelope plucky sound, and compressor set to multi-band mode. So yeah, I've had a lot of fun with that sound. With this one as well, what I found is cool with this waveform is that it's nice to layer it with a waveform from this spectral menu here, because they tend to be they tend to have a lot of harmonics. They tend to be more noisy, and so they add, I guess, like a layer of high-end sort of mush and detail to the sound. So yeah, if you're going to create waveforms like this, try adding layering with something from the spectral menu. On this kind of tip, back in Cubase, after I'd sort of played around with this wavetable that I made and got a bit bored of it, I thought it would be cool to try and make my own sort of percussion sounds that I could, that were kind of similar, that I could import into Serum. So I loaded up a version of an instance of Serum and tried to make my own sort of little electro blippy percussion sounds. So there's an example of one of them. Here's some other ones that I made. And what I've done is in Serum, I've just used this envelope here, and I've assigned it to the pitch of each oscillator to create, maximum range. So it creates from the very highest frequency to the very lowest frequency. And then I've, that creates your basic blip sound. That's what it creates. But I wanted to try and get a bit more tone from these wavetables, so I started running that sound using the different filters on here, the sort of more experimental ones, the formant filters, and then you can add another filter here, you can add a phaser. So I tried to sort of experiment with these two filters just to create give it more of a tone, so that I could create a whole bunch of different little samples like this, each with slightly different tone. And then I can drop them all into Serum. And hopefully as I morph through the wave, it's going to really change the tone of the synthesizer itself. So here's an example of one. Take the phaser off there. So that's, if we look at there, I've just, I've selected 5 of these little blip sounds that I've made. I've dropped them in here. I've used the morph feature, and then that's created a nice wavetable. And I think that's the wavetable that I used in this track here. And that track was done in Bitwig. So there we go, there's that bass sound. Again, what I did with this sound was I picked a wavetable from the spectral section in Serum just to layer it with, just to give it some top end buzz, and I've detuned it and put it a bit unison so it spreads out just to sort of fill out the sound a bit. Just another on, while we're looking at these wavetables in Serum, another cool feature when you're designing these wavetables, which can help it to sound more smooth when you're changing the wavetable position. To help it make it sound more smooth, what you can do is you can select all of these, or even you can select just some of them, and it's got this sort menu. And this sorts the wavetables out according to the content, their frequency content, by different methods. So again, as with the morphing, it's basically you want to just try different ones. That's all you can do is and see which sounds good. But they'll give you different results. That's probably not gonna do. It could be useful in this situation, but where the sort menu really is useful is if you import a sort of a more random waveform into Serum, and not as a single cycle, but if you just use the drag and drop import, because you can drag samples straight onto here and it will split into a whole bunch of wavetables. And so if you do that, that's where the sort menu is really useful. So yeah, a lot of fun with that bass sound. I'm just going to close Cubase down now, because it's annoying. I just want to show you one more bass sound. It's kind of a really nasty neuro sound here. And that sound comes from this track. That little nasty bass sound in there. I want to show you it because it shows something that I've been doing a lot for these sort of neuro sounds, which is to use two synthesizers. I'm using two instances of Serum here, one for the high frequencies and one for the low frequencies. And if you want those kind of sort of neuro, like, you know, sort of really techie drum and bass style sounds, this is a really good way to get them. So here's a high frequency layer of the sound, and here's a low frequency layer. And in this kind of sound, the high frequency layer really has no tonal content. There's got no notes in it. All the tone is coming from the low frequencies. The cool thing to do with Serum, or one of the really cool things, you know, one of the I think a lot of guys are getting really cool sounds using the FM mode in Serum. And so when I use the FM mode in Serum, I generally pick a complicated waveform and then modulate it with a simple waveform. So I'll generally pick the basic shapes as a starter, the basic shapes one, which is in this just the analog menu here, and it just gives you the standard basic waveform shape, sawtooth, and so on. And so I'll pick that as a starting waveform to modulate the complicated waveform. So I was playing about with this, and what I did, I just stumbled across this sound. I pitched the complex waveform, I pitched it down really far, and it sounds like that. I was like, wow, that's pretty disgusting. And then applied some frequency modulation to it, and it just sounds like, I don't know, someone splashing in water or something. You know? I was like, you know, that sounds really cool. It's got no tone to it. It's just a funny effect noise. But I thought that could sound really cool as a sort of neuro style bass line. Or you could equally just use some audio effect or something, because it's got no tone to it. So just to give it some movement, I've just used an LFO here to modulate various parameters. Again, I'm using a phaser. I'm basically an addict for phasers. Like, you know, if you've got a bass sound and it's like kind of sounding all right, and you want it to sound like it's really doing something, my first port of call is generally to put a phaser on it. In Serum, I love the phasers in there, but also I end up using this plugin as well a lot. I think this is my favorite sounding phaser, this Soundtoys Phase Mistress. So especially for like little edit basses or something, like where I've just got one note and it's just a little edit bass in there somewhere, generally I'll put this on and I'll automate the frequency or the mix or something, and it just gives, you know, it gives a nice little sort of, it gives the sound more tone, and you know, it gives it generally what I feel it's lacking. So the low layer of this sound is just when I'm sort of making these kind of sounds where it's just like got a kind of weird noise on the top. What I want on the bottom is a sort of distorted sub bass sound, and in Serum you've got this distorted C2 waveform, which kind of does that job for you. Sounds like this. Again, I've used a phaser to try and get some, cool tone movement on there. And of course, very important with these kind of sounds is to put some pitch bend automation on there. So as that note plays, you can see I've got like a nice pitching down, just like that. Again, use the LFO to create some movement in the filters. Got a low pass filter there as well. It's the LFO is assigned to this low pass just to give it some movement. And then just to thicken the sound up, I just added another oscillator with the octave. It's set much higher. And again, unison detune, so it gives it some stereo width. And that's what that layer is doing. So that's what I'm aiming for with these neuro sounds, is like a distorted sub, it's kind of sound on the bottom, and then a sort of almost atonal noisy sample on the top, and then LFO modulation just makes it, gives it some movement. So yeah, layering up two basses like that, definitely a good thing to do. I'm going to move on a bit quicker from here because we've talked about my favorite things, which is drums and bass. I just want to talk quickly about a lead sound. The lead sound from the Track Invader here has got a couple of cool techniques in it. Oh, here it is. So yeah, that lead sound is here. Got a really, I like the tone of this lead sound. Again, this one comes from Serum. There's a few things I've done in here to really give it a nice tone. And the first one is to use the oscillator sync, and I've assigned the mod wheel to the sync of oscillator 1 and 2, so that when you play it, up the octave and then move the mod wheel, you get the overtones there from the sync, and then modulating that as the line goes on creates a nice tone. Another way of giving it a really nice tone is both these oscillators are running through a low pass filter with the resonance turned up, and then that on the effect I'm running into the distortion here. So low pass filter with resonance going into distortion can give lead sounds a really nice tone. Of course, if you do that, you're going to, like, the distortion will add in a little bit of high end, but you are going to lose some of the real top end sparkle of the sound. So I've added in a bit of the noise oscillator as well, but that's not going through the low pass filter, so that adds in a little bit of the top end of the sound, and you don't need to worry that that's not tonal, because it's just top end sparkle. And then of course in Serum the multi-band compressor is on as well, so that ensures like the high end is going to be nice and bright. The other, pretty much now, yeah. I'm addicted because it can do so many cool things, really. I've used Massive a lot in the past, but I like to use Serum now because I like mainly the fact that you can, well, you can see the waveforms, you can see what they're doing. Yeah, well, no, I like to be able to see the waveforms and to be able to have the freedom to use the edit mode to change bits of them if I want. And not only that, but you can download the massive wavetables from the internet and you can import them into Serum anyway. So technically, if I do that, it's kind of like using massive anyway. In fact, I'll show you a sound quickly. This sound here, which comes from the Squam track. Not this sound, but the next one. That sound there. That sound is in here. I made that sound by these two waveforms are both actually the modern talking waveform from Massive, and I said I would never import it into Serum because it's modern talking and it's like a thing that you shouldn't use, but I just tried it and then again used the phaser in Serum and played about with automating the phaser and the wavetable positions and stuff and came up with that sound, and it sounded really cool. So yeah. Actually, something I did with this sound, you can hear like the notes are changing the tone of the notes as the line plays. And what I did was I created the sound, and then I created the line, and I was like, I want some of these notes to sound a bit different. So I made a copy of the exact same sound onto another a layer in the rack, and then I used this pitch, the MIDI pitch changer here, so that I can play different octaves of the keyboard, and it plays the same sound but with a different tonality. And I change in one of the sounds. I changed the filters and the wavetable position a little bit. So yeah, but I want to go back to the invader lead because there's a little cool technique on here that I use on lead sounds quite a lot, and that's with this effect rack here. And what I've got is the dry sound here, and then I'm using the LFO tool plugin, and I'm sending the notes. When you play the synthesizer, I'm also sending the notes into this LFO tool plugin so that it triggers each time you press a note. And when you do that, I'm just using this to take the very short attack of the note and then nothing else. And then you can mix that attack back in with the dry signal to give the note a really cool attack, transient attack. Ooh. Without it, it's just a cool way of bringing out those transients. And then after that, I'm driving it as well so that the transient is being clipped, so it's just keeping the the level of the out synth constant, and you're not generating loads of peaks out of there. And actually, this plugin here is a multi-band distortion, and it doesn't matter which multi-band distortion you use, but I like multi-band distortion on lead sounds and chord sounds and something like that, because it's generally it gives you a bit of a cleaner sound when you use multi-band distortions, especially if it's not a layered sound, if it's like a chord. Sorry, if it's not a mono sound, if it's a chord sound, particularly multi-band distortion will give you a lot nicer sound, and because the overtones generated are not from the whole spectrum, they're from individual chunks of the spectrum, and it just sounds a bit cleaner. Let's have a look for FabFilter Saturn So, for example, if I've got a lead sound or a chord sound, this is one I'll use quite frequently just to drive the sound, and I'll just pop in 5 bands like this. And instead of just doing the drive for one band, you can just select them all and turn the drive up, and it will give you a much cleaner sound than just if you had one band and just doing the drive for one band. So for lead sounds and chord sounds and pad sounds and stuff like that, multi-band distortion is a good key.